Laura Blumenfeld is a Middle East analyst, and former senior policy advisor on the State Department's Israeli-Palestinian negotiating team. Laura, thank you for your time. Now, the ceasefire talks, I just mentioned those. These are ongoing. So could you put into context for us not only what people are fearing in terms of escalation in the Middle East, but also the fact that this could have an impact on these ceasefire talks?
Yes, well, the ceasefire talks were dying, and so were the hostages. As we saw last week, six hostage bodies were recovered by the IDF in Gaza. So for the short term, this is clearly bad news. The talks that were expected to take place in Cairo on Sunday will most likely be put on pause. I mean, if for no other reason than the Ben Gurion, the Israeli airport, is closed, at least for the next several hours, so the team wouldn't even necessarily be able to get to Egypt. I am optimistic. I'm an American, so I'm going to be optimistic that in the long run, this actually could help the ceasefire talks because they were clearly stuck. And if tonight's actions or today's actions are limited and there are no sort of regional wider escalation involving Iran and others, it's possible that this kind of, it's not quite a tit for tat, we'll say all caps tit for tat, could be the sort of exchange of revenge and counter revenge that we needed to kind of bring some closure, at least for the Shukr assassination. And certainly Sinwar can now say that he had the Al-Aqsa flood, that he drew Hezbollah in and that they stood up for their Palestinian brothers in Gaza. And for Netanyahu and for the Israelis, look, they wanted to preemptively strike against Lebanon in early October, right days after the October 7th attack. It was Biden who pulled Prime Minister Netanyahu back from the brink for launching that attack. So in some ways, in sort of basketball terms, these could be the buzzer beater shots before the final game over.
So you mentioned Yahya Sinwar there, the head of Hamas. Now, I also want to ask you, though, about this tit-for-tat possibility that you're talking about, because do you think that this sort of scenario would be the kind that would satisfy Iran after the fact that they were very, very much embarrassed and humiliated on the world stage as during their president's inauguration, a top Hamas political chief was assassinated on their own territory?
Iran has a whole other set of considerations. I don't think that they're going to take it in the chin. They will not turn the other cheek. They will strike back, but not necessarily now and not necessarily militarily. I mean, they've always engaged in something called strategic patience, which is, there's a saying in the Middle East, if a guy takes revenge after 30 years, he was in a hurry. They are clearly playing the long game, a war of attrition with Israel. This week is a Shiite major holiday, Arba'in. It turns out it's hard to schedule a war in the Middle East. First, there was the Paris Olympics, and Macron asked Lebanon, maybe to keep your powder dry. And then there was the Democratic National Convention, and we had, Secretary Blinken circling the region, almost like a body bunker. To prevent escalation. So I don't think that necessarily Iran will be drawn in, but like I said, anything could happen now because, you have some civilians who are hurt on either side, and there's going to be the need to escalate.
While I have you on, I also do want to draw our audience's attention to the QR code that we're showing, because we do have a live page on our BBC News website, and on there we do have some comments from Hezbollah that I'd love for you to put into context for us and to get your reaction on, because they've said that this was them completing an initial phase of their response, and that the punishment they will give out will be severe and harsh. I wonder what you make of that, whether that puts into question this idea that this could be a tit-for-tat finished scenario that wouldn't necessarily escalate into something bigger.
Well, the Israelis have called for a 48-hour period of emergency. Their Secretary of Defense, their Defense Minister Gallant, is calling on the population. So it's not just one night, one and done. On the other hand, so much about these exchanges since October 7th has been not so much about being strong, but being smart. And so it's kind of our intelligence versus your intelligence kind of battle here. The Israelis were clearly caught by surprise on October 7th. The Shukr assassination was an intelligence coup for Israel, as was the Hania assassination in Tehran. So I think Hezbollah is feeling like they need to show that they can in some way penetrate and kind of shift that kind of dignity back into balance It's possible that, they already have, it's horrible to say, but wounded one person in Akko, which is quite deep into Israeli territory, that might satisfy the need, for publicly saving face.
All right, Laura, thank you for that update. Again,